what I've found is when you go in knowing your purpose 100%, it is very freeing from the nervousness and the, did I say this right? Doesn't matter. You know your purpose. You know why you're up there.
Every single individual has a story to tell, and they're great stories that need to be heard.
I want every listener to know they have the ability to change the world.
Welcome to the 1720 podcast.
What's up, Mountain Movers? Welcome back to the 1720 podcast. Stewie, we've had an awesome month, man. Some incredible guests, some incredible content, incredible people sitting in the hot seat.
Yeah, I've said this before. We go on these like spurts and runs where we get guests lined up, and it's not just me and you, right? And we've had a run of, is it 3? I think it's 3, like back to back to back. If they were awesome songs, I think the cool kids would call them bangers, but like really good ones lined up. So thoughts on this week are, I think we run through some of those, right? Just kind of recap them, recalibrate, and then get everybody prepped for our next set that's coming up for, I guess, tailing into June. So you want to kind of kick us off on that?
Yeah, and I will say, I feel like in our journey, this is the first time that a stop down solo is intentional. You know, we're in between like 3 awesome guests that have come, and then June's going to have 3 more awesome guests. Like, we got to talk about this because we pulled so much from it. We've had a lot of people and listeners talk about what they've pulled from these and ask what's next. And so this is going to be fun.
Yeah. So I'll give you the list just for you guys, if you haven't listened back for the last 3 weeks, what you missed, and then when you get to the end of this, you'll obviously going to want to go back and catch them. But I guess 3 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago, it was Dale Payne at Prism Electric. Dale, I think now in addition to the episode being straight fire, I think Dale now has the longest runtime on an episode as well. I think.
Him and Parscale probably.
Parscale hit me up afterwards complaining about how he no longer had the longest running episode mantle to carry. And I was like, man, okay. Like, go listen to Dale's again and you'll know why you don't have the longest running episode anymore. So shout out to Parscale, but also Dale's episode is pretty long, but you're going to want to bear down because it has lots of really cool things. I can think of like three blocks of that story that are excellent. So Dale was a few weeks ago. Then next up was Chasey Boy, as you call him, the old Chase Wood. Yeah. Also amazing. Not quite as long, but I feel like our episodes are tailing a little bit more than they used to these days because the storytelling and the conversation that we're having is amazing. So Chase has probably 2 giant blocks of his story that are awesome. Including a story where he chased down someone who stole his money. That I'd forgotten about that until I listened back to it and had a good laugh there. And then Jeff Wittenberg was, I guess, last week was Jeff Wittenberg. So fire in terms of keeping, training, retaining, engaging employees. There was more than a few, but a few really good spots in there. So I think we unpacked some of those. How's that sound?
Yep, absolutely. What's cool is I think we're going to, our shtick at the end of episodes is what's your one thing? Mm-hmm. And I think we're going to jump into our biggest nugget, our one thing from each one of these episodes. This past week at that Young Constructors Council panel, Melanie was moderating, and that's how she ended it to each of us.
Oh, that's awesome.
I've never been asked what is my one big thing. And I was like, oh boy, I gotta think about this and quickly because there's a couple hundred people staring at me.
Okay, so I'll take us. This is actually not into the ditch, but it's not where we're headed. But I'm going to steer into that because I think that was the first last week when I missed the YCC meeting. Was one of the first times I had to tell the YCC like, "Hey, I can't because of my schedule," and I missed it very begrudgingly because I knew that what was going on was going to be awesome. And so tell me, I wasn't there for it. I don't know what it was. And the only 1 million people who are in the YCC these days heard it. So what was it, man? What did you tell them when that shot got called to you?
For my one big thing?
Yeah. What'd you say?
Man, well, I'll just back up from that just a tad to lean into it is some of the goals that I set out for this year all are intertwined with each other with the no swearing, the going to church, which we're 20 for 21 for the year for church attendance. Swearing, I can't even tell you the last time I've cussed. Reading the Bible, warming up, like all of it's intertwined. And I feel this closeness to God that I haven't felt maybe since I was saved.
Oh,
like
wow.
there are moments happening, and of one mega moment that I've recently had. And I had another one the morning of the YCC panel where I was doing cardio and listening to worship music, and God put it on my heart that I was going to kind of share some of my testimony, up there. And my immediate response was, "No, I'm not." and
cool. That's a cool ask, G-Man, but I'm not doing it.
Yeah, that ain't happening. But as this is going to make perfect sense because you know how I'm wired more than most. Simon is in the YCC and he works with me. So I called him after I left the gym. I go, "Hey man, God put this on my heart. I'm going to share up there. And now that I've told you, there's no backing out."
Yeah.
So from an accountability standpoint, I know he's going to be in the crowd now. All right. There's no need to dwell on it. So that was a big part of the panel, man. Just when you go up there and the purpose isn't about you, it isn't about recognition. It's about helping somebody in that crowd, even if it's just one of the 200 to 300 that are sitting there. And what I've found is when you go in knowing your purpose 100%, it is very freeing from the nervousness and did I say this right? Doesn't matter. You know your purpose. You know why you're up there. And it was very engaging. And I think the crowd really liked what we had to say. But my one big thing was to fulfill my purpose, to build an army of mountain movers. That is my calling. Like if I could put it into one sentence, it's been there before 1720. It's here now. And it only gets stronger as the days go by. And it was a reminder that every single person in that crowd, you are a mountain mover. You might have doubts even when I say that comment, but you are special. You are uniquely gifted to move mountains in this lifetime. And so it was cool. It was cool to reflect on that and share that and kind of do as I was told from earlier in the day and share some testimony. But man, it was a fun time.
I was getting live tweets, if you will, just not really, but texts from Ian and from my office that was going on. And he was the whole event, man. The whole event was awesome, but he was texting me specifically when you were talking about how like you were spitting fire and it was awesome. He was pumped up and all this sort of stuff. So at a minimum, you spoke to him. I'm sure the other couple hundred folks too as well. But at a minimum, Ian came back fired up from it. So that's good.
Good, man.
That's good. All right, so let's do what we set out to do here. Give me dealer's choice. You can take any of our guests. Hit me with something that jumped out to you from one of them. Jeff, Chase, Dale.
Yeah, I'll go with the first one of the grouping, Dale Payne. And what really stuck with me was something very small that he said off air when we were done, because you hear his story and if you haven't heard it, it's the numerous bouts with cancer. He's currently going through his third bout of chemo, and he has a different lens on life right now, right? From several different capacities. And when we were done, he was talking about how his dog has been really frustrating him lately. And he's come to the realization, like he saw a shoe or a sandal all torn up, and he looked at that dog and he's like, I still love that dog. And that's just a shoe. And I know it's no small thing, but you also know that I'm living with a dog that's terrorizing this house. And it's really helped compartmentalize it. When I get home and my J's, my sandals, and my slippers in the same morning are torn up, and she's like peering over the couch when I get home, like I know I'm in really big trouble. And I just look at her and I just laugh and think about that Dale comment.
Yeah.
And that's been the most impactful thing, that it's just a possession.
Yeah.
That dog loves me. That dog loves this family. And it's just being a puppy. And it's really helped.
Yeah. There's like, extrapolate that out further though. It's also the like, don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff, right? I mean, it's whatever people have said that have got you frustrated, whatever things have happened that have got you bogged down, like in the grand scheme of things, most of it is small stuff. And sure, in fact, we should post the picture that you sent me as the episode photo with your J's chewed up. Because I was like, wait a minute, did that dog just chew up your J's? And obviously that's super frustrating, but it's just stuff. It's just dollar bills and stuff. And when we focus on dollar bills and stuff, it gets our perspective a little askew. It gets our businesses headed. We need to mind this shop, right? We need to focus on the dollar bills. But that's all you focus on, when you forget that there are people in your life, there are people in your home, there are people, like when you focus on the dollars instead of the people, you've lost perspective. So
Totally.
it is a cool story about more than just shoes being chewed up.
Yeah, it's definitely a big picture item.
Man, I was confident. I actually wrote down 2 because I was 100% confident you were going to land on Dale talking about the 4 stages of life, how you got 80 years and he broke them up into 20, 40, 60 years or whatever. I was confident you were going to hit that. So I will for just a touch. The one I really had highlighted was a different one because I was confident you were going to do 4 stages. But Dale talked about how he has this theory about the 4 different stages of life. And I forget exactly what it was. But it was basically like 0 to 20, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, and 60 to 80. And he spoke very intentionally about what was going on from his perspective during those life stages, which was insightful, but wasn't the most insightful thing. The most insightful thing I think I heard from him around that idea was transitioning from one to the other. As you go from one stage to the other stage, how those are difficult things to do, and then looking from your stage into other stages, because you're working with people who are usually working with people who are in different stages, who have different motivations and different things going on and different challenges in their life. And so this thing that Dale was talking about in terms of the stages, progression through, and acknowledging who's in them, that's really helpful. And it's unique in the sense that that's the first time I've heard it articulated like that. And it has been helpful, in a couple of different aspects of my life in the last couple of weeks of thinking about who's in that stage. What are they struggling with? What does this look like for them as they go from 3 to 4? And how can I be more empathetic around whatever emotions exist in that stage and whatever they're going through as they transition? And so that's been a good one. Because I was anticipating you were going to do 4 stages. What I was going to talk about was perseverance, and how, like, man, just sticking at it, man, just in the face of cancer diagnosis after cancer diagnosis, just sticking with it. And I may have even said it during the episode, like I probably second guessed my ability to stick with it if that was the phone call I got. But hearing him encouraging people through it was awesome. And I'll dovetail it with this end of the story, which is like how our unintended consequences of the podcast have, like, experientially impacted other people. And I caught up with Dale a couple 3 weeks later, and he told me this story, and I won't say names for purposes of like protecting confidences, but there was someone in his orbit that week, like the week we released his episode, had gone into the hospital to have a tumor removed from their brain. And have I told you this story yet, Kev?
I don't think so.
Oh man. So he had a tumor removed from his brain, and it was like on a Monday, he went in on the day that the episode released, but he knew that Dale was going to be on. And so when he came out of surgery, like, that was one of the first things he listened to. I was like, I want to listen to what Dale has to say. He's a friend of mine. I want to hear his story. Well, Dale's story was persevering through the diagnosis. And the guy called Dale and said, hey man, like, I had taken this diagnosis as a death sentence and was prepared to just roll over on this. And then I heard your episode. And then I was convicted that this is not the end of my story. And Dale shared that story back with me. And I was like, man, like, that is some insanely divine intervention around this, to, like, the timing to have him on, to have that guy where he was at that time, and then to have that message from Dale in a way that was super impactful. So, man, again, I've said it before. If you go back and listen to season 1, episode 1, our goal was, like, if we could just change one person's life, we did it. Oh, there you go, man. That's it. So shout out to Dale, man. That was an awesome episode. If you guys haven't listened to it yet, circle back. It's a long one. It'll take you a couple of commutes, but it is 1,000,000% worth it.
Totally. Yeah, it's been so well received. I think the season item, I think it hits home to people transitioning. If you're right in the middle of it, it might not do much, but I think a lot of people I know are in that going from season 2 to season 3, and it causes a lot of confusion, frustration, excitement, like all the feelings. So definitely go back and listen to that one.
Yep. All right. So dealer's choice. You got Chasey Boy or Wittenberg up next. Hit me with a big takeaway from there.
Well, I'm a big structure guy, so I gotta keep this in order.
That joke only makes
So,
sense.
pun intended with
Yeah, that joke only makes sense if you work at Dynamic Glass or listened to the episode. Or our Sam Belunda. Is
or
it Sam?
Belunda.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Dylan Turner, he was laughing while he was telling me. He's like, dude, you guys were such goofballs in that. I was laughing out loud in my car ride. And some wouldn't, but Dylan, the three of us were super weird in the office for years. So like Dylan knew how weird the atmosphere of that room was for the recording, so he had a blast with it. But
yeah, he had like
I
inside
know you can
track to the tone of all of what was going on. Yeah.
totally. Yeah, he was in on all the inside jokes.
Yeah. All right, hit me with the Chasey Boy one take here.
You're going to be able to get. I know you're 0 for 1 on Dale, but you'll guess Chase's because I kind of shared it with both of you in a text as my biggest takeaway. Just hearing Chase's story and listening back to it after we recorded, and how his family, was Christ-centered, welcomed people and children that weren't off that great into their homes for shelter and for food and going to church, and just having that compass early in life ends up turning somebody like Chase into Chase, right? And I'm not saying that he didn't have a difficult life or there was difficult seasons. He had somewhere to turn to in those difficulties. And I shared up on stage. I was very vulnerable on the Young Constructors Council panel about like always having a heart, like a strong heart, but no compass. It was just, it would aim somewhere and I thought it was the right place to aim, and it would just lead to more isolation, darkness, trouble, whatever the case may be. And the realization that, people are great, right? Like, I stand for people, but at the end of the day, people let you down. They'll fail you because we're all broken. But there's a God that won't. And he sent his son, Jesus, and not having that relationship growing up was pretty impactful. And so I look at the type of person Chase is, and then I look at my family and my 4-year-old daughter, and I want her to have that relationship with God. So when she does face difficult seasons, not only are Sadie and I there for her, but she's got a God that loves her unconditionally, and that she's saved by faith, and just having that, so she has a better shot at going through difficulties without feeling so darn alone.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's a big one, right? That's a big one just from so many aspects, but from listening back to all 3 of those episodes, like pretty profound for my journey and for what I want to do, the generations behind me.
Yeah. Mine wasn't completely different from that. And I knew you were going to pick that because we had talked about it a little bit. The thing that jumped out to me from Chase was how his worldview changed when he spent time in Africa. And it reminds me that like everyone has a particular worldview. Everyone has a particular bent on the things that they see, but there's so much more than what you see like in your neighborhood or on your drive to work or at your office. And Chase had that opportunity and adventure by spending some time in Africa. But one of the things that Ashley and I talked a lot about when we came home for Rwanda a couple of years ago was how it may have taken us going to the other side of the world to have had that experience to like change our worldview, but it didn't need to happen. But I didn't need to have to go to the other side of the world to get it. That's where I had that experience, but I didn't have to go there to get it, because at least from where I live, I'm probably 3 or 4 miles away, 5 or 6 miles away from people who live in situations that are completely different than the one I am. And so it just reminds me that like everybody lives in a bubble. Sometimes you have to go far, far away to get outside the bubble. But the idea of and having the experience of getting out of your bubble, it changes your perspective, it changes your outlook, it changes where your heart lives, and it changes your worldview. And so you heard a little bit of that through Chase's story, but I guess the challenge is, maybe in order for you to have that change, you don't need to hop on a flight and go 14 hours on the other side of the world. You can have it really close to your house if you're looking for it.
Oh yeah, it's all over the place, man. I think I shared. I don't even know if it was on air or not on the Grant Hagen episode, because he said exactly that. You don't have to go there to see it. That there's people in Dallas that haven't even seen the Dallas skyline before.
Yeah,
because all they know is that 8 block by 8 block grid. And you learn that in the Big Brother Big Sister program when they want you trained up, right? Like to know what you're getting into and how to react to things, and that there is some vast differences in pretty much every major metropolitan area. Like you're going to see some disparity there, which that disparity is opportunity, opportunity to make an impact.
Right. All right. Wittenberg, you want to give me a one take on Wittenberg? That's going to be hard because there are a million.
Yeah,
most of the ones for me started to hit about, as they have a tendency to do, like about 45 minutes in, and I was like, "Oh, good one." But there were some early ones too, man. He had a crazy story growing up that I don't think anybody would have ever known if you hadn't asked the "Hey, where'd you come from?" question. So,
for sure.
All right, hit me with a good one.
Well, I turned one of them, that is the one I'll go with, into a daily motivation following his episode recording.
Mm-hmm.
And you think of recruiter and it's just moving people around, and you work with candidates, you work with the employer that's your client, and you're just trying to seek people out. And him and I had this conversation at the lunch leading up to the guest spot. But okay, we were calling them blue chip. You get that blue chip candidate to fill that position. Now what?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do with this person to make sure that they stick around your company, that you follow through on your commitments, not just 2 months in, but 2 years in? Like, how are you, if somebody's blue chip, like they're going to be constantly hungry for opportunity, or to know they're making a difference, to have some visibility and next steps. Like, even if you're not this major company with some mega structure on that, you could still have those touch points and those conversations. Like I know where people stand that direct report to me, and I know where they want to go. And some things, if the company stops growing today, they're going to have to leave because there's not an opportunity big enough. But it tells me that the company needs to grow so this person can grow and be part of that growth. And man, that is so big time. I know employers try to put on, just like when you're trying to win a big project, right? You roll out the red carpet, you put on the fancy outfit, you do the slideshow of all the best things. But then when they get that experience with you, they're like, that wasn't the experience I got.
Mm-hmm.
And same with hiring. Like, you bring the best of the best into the conference room to wow the person and let them know that they're coming into just an awesome group of people. And I don't believe in that and do that, because it just seems like bait and switch, right? Like, very realistic with an interview and a candidate on what the role is, why I think they'd be a good fit. If they're not a good fit, that's okay. Let's save both of us a lot of time. But I don't try to dangle much carrots in those interviews. I try to just let them know exactly what the role is and where they would fit. And then so day one, there's no surprises, and they go home satisfied. And then we work on those next steps together. That's a challenge, when you're hiring a bunch of ladder climbers, like especially in startup mode. How do you keep people fed and satisfied and hungry and all that sort of stuff? As a leader, you need to constantly be reflecting and wrestling with these ideas, and just make sure you don't, all right, I got Stewie, now I'm going to move on to the next guy. because you might not have Stewie for very long.
Yeah, right. That's a good one. One of the things we wrestle with sometimes is we talking about all of it, but then what's your day one look like in terms of like onboarding and perpetuating? And so that's an issue. And I don't know, we talked about it specifically with Jeff. I think back to having talked about it with prior guests. But that from day one, like once they're onboarded, once they're in the doors, the game is afoot to begin the process of like growing them into whomever they want to be. And this kind of dovetails into the one that I was wanting to talk about, which was he told that story about when he worked at the bike shop and he was sort of pressured into closing the deal with the guy who wanted to buy a bike. You remember that story?
Yep.
And my takeaway from that was, as I wrote it down, is like everyone has a timing. Everyone has their timing. And so that I feel like that mantra affects a couple of different areas, but in this particular instance, like as you onboard a new employee and their goal, you have to identify what their goals are so that you can help manage it through their timing or get them going in the places when the time is right or whatever the case may be. And I think typically, and I think maybe the construction industry is just as bad as the lawyering industry, the legal industry, is that everybody has like this is in 2 years you do this, and then in 10 years you're going to have this job, as opposed to assessing what everyone's timing looks like. And some may be faster and some may be slower, but what is it, and what is my job as a leader to lean into that timing and help people either correct it, advance it, move into it, manage it, etc. The thinking about the time element around leadership was super interesting to me. So that was the one I wrote down for Jeff.
Agreed. That was good. And I agree on the whole second half. I think even at one point we were like, oh man, he's heating up.
Mm-hmm.
He was getting on a roll there.
Yeah. So if you haven't, I'll wrap this kind of section of our recap up here just to say, man, if y'all haven't listened to those, circle up and go back. They are great. The last 3 weeks have been fire. So don't miss them. That's not just us trying to jam up listens, because it's literally for everyone else besides ourselves. It's what's in there is for you. There's no benefit to us, but go back and listen to them. And it kind of parlays us into what's next for this episode, which is 3 more weeks of just smoke. So you want to give us a preview of what's up next on the 1720 podcast?
Yeah, man. This is our Mountain Mover tribe hard at work.
Yes.
Like, hey, I know this guy. Hey, this guy lives by me. And I've had people specifically say, don't give me a shout out. So I'll just talk in generalities. But man, all hookups, the homie hookup next month.
Mm-hmm.
So there's 1 week that's still TBD in the month of June. But man, we have Chris Cassidy, who is a former Navy SEAL, a former NASA astronaut and flight commander. Homie's been in space.
Yep.
So I don't know how I'm going to hold back from asking very dumb questions when it comes to the whole NASA side, because this will be our first astronaut.
Yes.
But he also he runs the Medal of Honor Museum, and so he's integral to DFW and that museum that they're building in Arlington by the stadium.
Yep.
And for our tribe, he wants to know more people in the construction space. So that's his motivation to come on. He wants his name more out amongst our people. And that I saw the drawings for that museum. It is incredibly custom. But man, just like taking a step back from that, like the Medal of Honor and what that means, and the recipients and the stories of those recipients, like the history of that, that is going to be so awesome.
Yep. Is that a shout out you're not giving? Is that on the secret, how that connection came together?
No, that one wasn't a specific don't ask, don't tell one.
Yeah.
The other one was.
This is the Cassidy connection is a 1720 guest who has, made the connection, hung out with us for a little while, made the connection. And so that's cool.
Deep red.
Is that one's deep red? Yeah.
It's deep red.
All right. What else? We got 2 more in the pipe. What else?
We got Michael Horn, who is the CEO of Parkland Foundation. And you and I had like an intro Zoom meeting with the guy, and holy cow. Like the big picture stuff beyond, a hospital, right? Like how do we make communities better? How do we drive change? Like it's going to be so action packed.
One of the things, I started into that the wrong way. Sometimes when we make a guest ask or a guest connection gets made, it's yeah, I'm in. Just on the ask. This one I think was close to that, but there was like a hey, let's get together, because I suspect people like that get lots of asks, lots of media asks, lots of will you do this, will you say this, will you jump on this, will you do an interview, will you do the podcast? And so he was, I think, being respectful of his own time to want to like hang out with us for just a minute to make sure we weren't crazy people. And one of my favorite parts of that was, we hop on a Zoom with him for, I don't know, we probably hung out for 10 or 15, 20 minutes. But in the first couple of minutes after we talked about like what we're up to and why we're doing this, he was like, yeah, I'm in. And then we spent the next 15 minutes kicking around ideas, talking about prior guests, angles we've taken, things that he's interested in, so we can make sure to make that episode be super meaningful and impactful. So that is that one a secret? Can we tell who the hookup was there?
No, yeah, I think we can.
That's Parscale, right? After he was on, he was like, let me connect you with some of my Leadership Dallas homies, and made that connection for us. So that was that 1720 network at work there for everybody. And then one more. Lay it on us.
Yeah, and I mean, it's as we're entering Memorial Day weekend, reflecting on what that means and everything. We got Stephen Holly, who is he's with Stillwater Capital, so he's in our space. I think he oversees the industrial warehouse side from a developer standpoint, but he's also a former Navy SEAL. He was the co-founder of the nonprofit Carry the Load, which is, I mean, they're doing a whole month thing right now of who are you carrying? That's kind of the theme, and people do walks and raise money. And I know the construction industry is pretty entrenched in it. He owns a company called Six Site Gear, which when I told Preston he was coming on, I didn't know that he was involved in Six Site until Preston was like, oh my God, this is awesome. So this dude has like all the awesome things.
There you go. So that's our next three up. I don't know exactly what the dates are lined out specifically, but coming soon to a podcast near you. That's our next three up. So be on the lookout for those.
Our strike ratio is 1,000%. We're batting 1,000% with when a former guest a really like loyal, like weekly listener suggests somebody and introduces us, it's a home run every time.
Yeah. Well, in terms of the yes, and then because they're coming from guests or listeners, they're a home run in terms of like content, like straight down the fairway off of there. Yeah, that's right. All right. Anything else before we break our little short episode previewing and reviewing?
No, man, it's good to see you've made it through a really busy season.
Yes, it is. We I'll tell a little story here, but we got ahead of our recordings heading into this last almost month of my life because I was mired down in a very large arbitration hearing for a client, and it has consumed the last 3.5 weeks, almost 4 weeks, coming out on the other side of it. So we're back to real-time live recordings. We got to get caught back up and get ahead of it a little bit, but we had to do that in order to sort of bridge over this just insanity of a season. So
even if it took Sunday night.
That's right. This might be the closest. This might be the closest we've actually recorded to going live. We're 10 hours out. So
yeah, it's either that or when we used to do the BYLR radio, the Build Your Life Resume. Those were always really close.
Sometimes so close it was like, you do a couple, I'll do a couple. Just jam them in. It's the best we can do right now.
That's right. Yeah.
All right, folks. That'll wrap us for this week. We will see y'all next week. And in the meantime, y'all stay out there, keep moving mountains.